Okay. Okay. I'm not sure if anybody's here yet, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. Um, probably going to use this for YouTube. Make some clips and stuff, so trickle in, that's cool. If not, be catching on the. So, we got a couple people going, y'all. Welcome to Metapolitic. I'm James. This is like my political section of this whole bigger project I'm doing called the Ruberos. And I got a lot of stuff on my mind tonight. I finished the Technofeudalism book last week, maybe the week before. And honestly, my ADHD race car monkey brain has already moved on to like 100 other things that I would probably rather talk about. But so I'm going to show some restraint here, talk about like what I planned on first place. But just to clear it out of my thoughts, I'm gonna share whatever I've been up to in the last week or so. So anybody who's close to me knows that I talk about this story that I've been working on conceptually and writing little bits and pieces of here and there that's based around the simulation hypothesis, which is a philosophy paper Nick Bostrom wrote. And it got pretty popular in, social consciousness. Now people talk a lot about, like, are we in a simulation? That's basically what it's about. So that's kind of the primary plot device, but using that to explore some philosophical ideas and this kind of thing. So I was sharing parts of that on LiveJournal. I spent a lot of time working on some of the stories and moving stuff over to Wattpad because LiveJournal is pretty much dead. So I did that this week, and that was I like working on that project. It's really fun, and I'm excited about that. So I'll be sharing stuff there on Wattpad as time goes on. Little bits and pieces of stuff that I'm working on with the story. It's kind of like a bunch of short stories that are interlaced and they overlap in certain ways. So, anyways, another thing I've been working on is mapping out the history and flow of human ideas and philosophy. I'm a big philosophy nerd, and it's based on Gene Gebser's framework from the ever-present origin. All that deep philosophy stuff underlies so much of the politics and political ideas that we talk about all the time. And that's really what this is about, this stream. It's kind of trying to reach deeper and look deeper into some of the things that people are talking about, and where do these ideas come from, and how did we get to this point, and looking at the history and the ideologies and the big concepts and what happened and how that stuff was formed. So Gene Gebser does that, but he does it in a way that's like, I don't know, like tracing it from like the origins of consciousness till now. But he focuses mainly on Western philosophy, so I'm trying to incorporate everything. So a lot of folks, like, they think that deep philosophy stuff is just like a waste of time, Those questions like, what's the world made out of? And like, I can see why people think that's just kind of mental masturbation or whatever, but it's actually really valuable. It dictates a lot of like how we see the world and how we operate in it. These like assumptions about and how it. And one of the first people that I read that really kind of got me to think of it differently was Martin Buber. He talks about like this relational ontology, which is like, that reality arises like in relationships between things, not so much as like just these static objects or like little particles like BBs that are eternal, and they bounce off of each other and make all this stuff happen, which is like a part of the story, but it's not everything there is to it, maybe. But anyways, for example, like this psychologist Julian Jaynes, who was working in the 70s, he wrote a book called On the Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. If anybody's ever read that, it's about he kind of argues that humans didn't always have this like egocentric self-awareness that we have, where we look at our own internal monologue as us talking to ourselves. He said that before a certain point in history, our ancestors looked at that voice, that internal monologue, as either the gods or spirits or their ancestors or something like that, talking to them and guiding them. And he brings up a lot of stuff. He digs into, they both do, Gebser too, like art, literature, different things that they look at to support that idea. And the reason he calls it bicameral is because he says it's separated. It's like the talking part and the listening part of the brain. But that just gives a little insight into how people might have thought differently and looked at the world differently before us. And that also invites the thought that it's possible to look at it differently than we do now. Anyways, I don't agree like entirely with everything Julian Jaynes talks about, but what Gebser is saying, Gebser was like a couple decades, maybe, actually he was the 40s, and I think Jaynes was the 70s. So several decades prior, Gebser was proposing a similar idea, but it was, for the entirety of human history and development of human consciousness altogether. So why is that important? Talking about like this revolution, this like emerging new form of human consciousness that even Gebser was talking about, and that I kind of saw in what I was saying in Martin Buber. That is a lot more exciting to me than talking about like what Elon Musk said this week, or 2024 election season, or whatever. But it all ties together ultimately, so I'm here for it. Anyways, I love that stuff more than anything, and it really feels like we are in the middle of a huge, albeit very slow, paradigm shift in the way that people think. Most of the ideas that we talk about in politics and just everything else in science everywhere is really tied to this like physicalist, materialist worldview. Like the left versus right from the French Revolution. The supporters of the king sat on the right. Those are the conservatives, and the revolutionaries sat on the left. The democracy supporter. And we still think of things in those terms. I mean, Karl Marx called his theory of class struggle as like the driving force behind social cultural development. He called it dialectical materialism, emphasis on the materialism part. Because Hegel, who he was pretty much copying his homework, already had a theory, he called it the dialectical process. Karl Marx has imported that into like a materialist worldview and tried to reframe it as like a thing that happens in the world rather than in the world of ideas. So that was a shift. That was like the last big shift was towards that worldview. And that was a time in the world when like everybody was doing that. All the intellectuals who were trying to be taken seriously wanted to portray themselves as being scientific, even if they weren't, even if they were full of shit. So what's up, Tree? But yeah, they just wanted to be seen as being scientific and being materialists. It's kind of the spirit of the age. So I feel like now we have enough puzzle pieces and brought up enough questions in response to thinking about things that way. We got enough insights like that we can mature and move past that, especially like in some of the stuff in physics, quantum physics, and science, and whatever. We can explore all that stuff later. I'm sure we will. First thing I wanted to talk about that I had planned to talk about, now that I got the brain dump clearing stuff out of the way, is Elon Musk. Something that Elon Musk talked about this week. And it's not like, I don't want to talk about the whole failure of X spaces or whatever they call it, that, you know, his conversation with Trump had technical difficulties and that was a big deal, and the same thing happened with Ron DeSantis or whatever. It's something specific that he posted that I thought was kind of before we jump in too, I want to invite folks to join the book group. Let me pull it up here. Got it somewhere. That's there. Get it back on Facebook. What's up, Chris? Thanks, man. Alright, so I posted that in the chat on both Facebook, and you know, that's where we can like continue these conversations more in depth, dive deeper into everything. Putting some finishing touches on the Discord server too. Hopefully I can have that up for everybody by next week. And if anybody knows about that kind of stuff, let me know. I also started a newsletter on Medium, which I wrote like a book review kind of critique of this Technofeudalism book on there that I'll share also. And I'm open to having columnists or like new people who want to contribute. So if you're interested in that, hit me up. All right, Elon Musk. He posted something on X. Switch to. All right, here it is. So it's this thing about you watch The Hunger Games, Decided with Resistance, Star Wars, The Matrix, Divergent, V for Vendetta. He's like naming all these movies that are about people rising up against the ruling elites, and saying when it's fiction you guys understand, but you don't see it when it's the reality you're living in wild. And I don't know, like I thought it was interesting. I shared it on Facebook, and I said, bro, you're literally the elite. And I got some good conversation going around it. A friend of mine sent me this little documentary on him that was really good. I learned some things from it. But the guy, he did his name is Johnny Harris. I can share that too. It's on Facebook also. Yeah. That's kind of what I thought about it too. This guy did a really good job. He obviously did a lot of work and researched this and tried to like make it like unbiased and nonpartisan. And I thought he did a really good job of it. Like I said, I learned some things that I didn't know about Elon Musk's past and history, and he like dispelled a bunch of rumors that are, political bullshit that people say. But he kind of came to the same conclusion I did about like how Elon started and how he was maybe a little more moderate in the beginning. He was even like pushing some LGBT stuff and everything. And then he got pushed further to the right as time went on, which was like to be expected. I'm a billionaire, but I think it had a lot to do also with the Twitter acquisition and him kind of getting pigeonholed into that like political category that way, and then just his like whole digging his heels into the free speech censorship debate. So, I mean, he did it to himself in a lot of ways. But yeah, I have no doubt, like you were saying, Tree, that he sees himself as an outlaw, some kind of rebel, which he is in a lot of ways. I think he was a loner. He talks about in that video how when he was a little kid, his dad was basically like super asshole and pretty independent from a young age. But he was a super nerd. He learned how to code, and he he figured it out himself. So I think he takes a lot of pride in that. And he does see himself as like this kind of like rebel outlaw figure who's like very independent. And I think he does like liken himself to those kind of figures. Those like it's funny to think of him relating to Katniss Everdeen or whatever, but I think it taps in. He's like tapping into this populist narrative of fighting against the elites, which is a big thing on the right as well as the left. But it's funny to me that the right is so into that kind of stuff. Like it's almost like this thing is backwards, It's like he's saying it's ironic that you guys don't realize this, but it's the other way around. Because The Matrix, for example, is like written by some trans sisters. It's like strongly LGBT queer coded. It's like a story about being your true self despite social norms. I guess for the red pill people who took over the Matrix memes and all that, and like lingo and everything, that includes being like blatant homophobes and anti-feminists. That's who they really are. I don't know. But where it's really ironic to me is that all these movies are about resisting big power structure. Yeah, it's really true. It's like the Matrix is so like that's the one they chose to push their like red pill narrative through, but it's so crazy. This world is like more and more absurd all the time. Like in all these stories, they're pushing against like these big power structures and fighting the elite rulers of the world who are screwing everything up. And like whether Elon Musk wants to see himself as part of that group of people or not, he's one of the richest, if not the richest, most powerful people on the planet right now. So it's like, I know you want to co-opt the narrative to kind of frame yourself as this underdog where you're less like the authority people and you're trying to change things for the better or something. But like what he's doing is really not that different. from what industrialists did in the past, or what like entrepreneurs and people going for the like consolidating all this economic power in one place have done in the past. It's just the same old story over again. So for me, it brings up the question of like, who it really is the elite? Who are the rulers of the world? And it's easy to get caught up in that like anti-establishment, anti-elitist messaging. But who are we really talking about? Who I know like the QAnon and the big deal is like they just want to say it's the Democrats. But I mean, the Republicans have been in control of things. Yeah, who are they? Who is the enemy? I just thought of something like that. A big thing they talk about in like leadership circles, from my time in the Navy and being a chief in the Navy and everything, is that like it's basically your fault when things aren't going right with the people that you are charged with managing. And sometimes they take it to extremes. It's like one of your people goes out and like gets in trouble on the weekend or something. Like they got drunk and got in trouble with the police and went to jail, and it's like somehow it's a failure of leadership on your part. But I can see that like like you can influence people a lot when you're in those positions, a lot more than people think. I used to say that to the people that were coming up under me, that like make sure to tell your people they do a good job when they do a good job, because like it costs you nothing. It might mean nothing to you. It's like not a big deal, but to them it might like be life changing. You never know. I don't want to go too far off on a tangent, but there's a lot of stuff about that, examples of that, where this guy has a really good TED talk about it. Forget his name. He's talking about lollipop. It's like he calls it lollipop moments, because he gave this kid a lollipop and it completely changed his life, and he told him like 4 years later, and he had no recollection of it. I didn't even know I was making such a big a difference in that person's life. But that being said, like, if you're a person who has like so much power and influence, I know you can't just wave a magic wand and change the world, but if you're not doing what you can do to make it better for little people, then like, why do you turn around and blame it on them and say that they're not getting it? Like, what are we supposed to be doing? Voting for Trump? Like that's like, because we're going to get into that too, and it all ties into the technofeudalism stuff also. But let me just say, man, like we already said, Elon Musk is one of the wealthiest people, if not the wealthiest. And I say that because like, even though he's at the top of the Forbes list, like I've heard like some of these like Saudi and UAE, like there's people that maybe they don't even know how much money they have, and they so who knows how much money those people have. But there's a lot of other reasons why he's influential, just aside from him being wealthy. He owns all these companies: Tesla, SpaceX, X, formerly Twitter, social media. Like that's a big one. What's his other one? The one that's like giving people internet or whatever. Starlink. And then he's got this like the Boring Company working on transportation industry stuff. He's into everything. So he's got influence in all these industries. And the government relies on SpaceX. Like big companies rely on SpaceX to put satellites in space, do things like that. So he's ahead of all the competition. Bezos and Bill Gates and them are trying to. I think even Branson has a thing too with Virgin where they're trying to compete with like space travel, private space travel, and space logistics stuff. But yeah, for sure. That's exactly what I was saying. And that's what the guy says in the video, that he started out to like have this kind of like, I want to do good in the world. And I even liked him because of that in the beginning. And, you know, when he started taking off more and more, like the anti-union stuff started coming out, and then talk about like reports from his workers about like just how brutal and like horrible of a boss he is and stuff, that just like I was like, oh gosh, man, this guy. And then when all the Twitter stuff blew up, that's when it was like, okay, we're past the tipping point. Yeah, that's interesting that you bring that up, Tree, because I saw, and the way I like interpreted the whole Tesla thing was that, and that's another thing, that like he was being a rebel, because all the big auto companies, they did not want electric vehicles to take off, you know, because they're going to lose money. They're going to lose money in so many ways, and the oil companies too, that they're like in cahoots with. They don't want that, so they did everything they could for so long to keep it from happening here. And they were even like making the cars ugly as shit. Other than their like smear campaigns and all the propaganda and stuff, they were just making the cars ugly. And like you know, remember the Republicans were always just talking about how much a loser you are if you drive an EV, and like you're, you know, like you never get laid and that kind of stuff. And then Elon Musk came in and he was like, fuck that, I'm going to make some cool ass EVs. And I'm going to like, and it was great for him because everybody started buying them. You know, he kind of rode on his whole like personality for that too. But, you know, people started buying the cars, and he like revolutionized and kickstarted that whole industry that way. And I even had like I have this. See if I can screen. Maybe it's this. It's this. Yeah. It's like an old tweet that he did. He made this tweet back in 2018 about, he's like fucking with right wingers about being anti woke, basically, and saying that don't buy our cars if you have a problem with us celebrating gay pride and whatever. So yeah, I think he started out like you were saying, good intention, and then he just got pushed like further into the right because, for one thing, he was like, so like all the Twitter stuff and the, but yeah, he's there now. And yeah, me too. I think so too. I mean, there's some really rich people who are, you know, like, I don't want to say like hardcore leftist, but they're much more to the center than you know, than most of the super wealthy are. Like Warren Buffett is one of them. Warren Buffett talks a lot about how like tax reform should be a thing. He's like really outspoken about gerrymandering too. But he released his tax returns one year. I don't remember when that was, but he was basically showing how he pays less tax on his personal income tax than probably you or me do, because he can get all these deductions and everything. And he said that's just not fair, because like, even though he paid like several millions of dollars in taxes, his personal income, that's not even considering his businesses and all that. On his personal income tax, I don't remember, but just for example, say maybe his like gross income was like 20 million, and then his you know, like he paid like 4 million in taxes or something. But his adjusted gross income was, I don't know, like if it was 20, then his adjusted gross income was like 17 or something. So like even if he was taxed at 100%, he would still have made $3 million. Even if he paid 100% tax rate, because the adjusted gross income is like your, you don't pay taxes on your gross income, you pay it on the AGI. And there's like factors that play into that, whatever. But he didn't bring that up. I always like to point that out, but he was just saying that it's not fair that I'm paying lower percent taxes than, regular working people who are, he was like, it's kind of like the parable of the story in the Bible, the widow's mite or whatever it's called, where all the rich people are in the temple, like giving money and, like making a big scene of it. And then like after everybody kind of clears out, this like old beggar lady kind of sneaks in there and gives them like basically like a penny. And somebody noticed and started like laughing about it and making fun of her. And Jesus was basically like don't make fun of that, man. That's like, she gave more than everybody else, because to her that's like, she needs that more than those guys needed it. And that's kind of what Warren Buffett was saying about, those people need that money more than I need the money. So like the whole thing about, they pay most of the taxes, the rich pay most of the taxes. Well, they should pay most of the taxes. And like, again, I don't want to get off on a super tangent or anything, but there's something really interesting called modern money theory. That's like, it's tied to like the concept of the fiat money and the fractional reserve banking. Like we got away from this Bretton Woods gold standard in the 70s, and since then we like our money just it floats. It's fiat money. So anyways, like they can, like taxes and all that shit, yeah, there's like some important roles for it and like controlling inflation and this and that, but like this whole arguments that people bring up about like, if they give foreign aid, it's going to cost us more money in taxes. Like that's all bullshit, man. They can just make up as much money as they want. Like there's nothing stopping them from coming up with enough money to pay for whatever they want to. It's all fake. Like, I mean, they can't just do it, like that. It's not like unlimited cash, because there's consequences economically, but it's an interesting thing to look into, how all that works. And it's like, it doesn't work like how your household budget works. People want to say that like we need to balance the budget and cut the deficit and all that. And that's crazy, because it's like the whole fiat money system is based on the fact that the United States government owes money to the Federal Reserve. Like the way money gets created is the Federal Reserve buys treasury bonds from the government that the government will pay back to the bank at like on interest. I mean, they sell them off as investments to speculators and whatever. That's what government bonds are. But like if they eliminated all the national debt, there would be no money. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't work like that. So it's funny when people start getting into the weeds about like we can't afford to pay for healthcare, or like these immigrants are causing my taxes to go up. Like that's all just political bullshit. They use the taxes to screw people over to make them think that they're getting fucked up by immigrants or whatever. Anyways, that was a tangent. Like in addition though to his companies and everything, like he's also just like a really big because he got really popular, like we were saying in the beginning, being like a personality. His public persona and his celebrity status is also really influential. He has this huge platform that he could use to do good and like make all this impact. And he uses it. He's on social media posting, this shit. But I feel like he's not seeing the whole picture and like what his role is in it. Or maybe he is and he just doesn't give a shit and he just wants to make more money than get more control than he already has. I mean, I'm sure that is something he's trying to do, but as far as the like humanitarian stuff and trying to save the world, all the shit he was talking about in the beginning, like we got to go to Mars because humanity's not going to survive. I think seems like he kind of gave up on a lot of that stuff. How he's gotten more like ego focused. Anyways, this one out. I'll get rid of this one. Anyways, he's been consolidating economic power and influencing people to the right, his followers and everything. And he's really like going hard into endorsing Trump and getting people to vote for Trump and talking about how Trump's like the savior of America. Kind of buying into that whole QAnon narrative and everything. Yeah, sure, it's way more obvious. Must be tough to be a celebrity. You're getting criticized for everything all the time. I have some sympathy for people. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, yeah. Who knows, like, what the behind-the-scenes conversations are with all that stuff, That's what I was saying about being so wealthy, like you're privy to those kind of conversations because you have so much leverage and so much control over things. And you know how Trump is. He's just like he acts like he's some kind of like mafia boss or something. like he's already king of the world and he's making these promises, making people offers they can't refuse. But the other thing I was thinking a lot about recently was the Project 2025 stuff. And I mean that it ties into all this because like Elon is supporting Trump and supporting his agenda, which is the Agenda 47, whatever he's calling it. It's his plan for when he takes office. And if you compare the 2025 and the 47 together, you see some like obvious similarities. 2025 is way more extreme, and like the people that I've seen on the right, the main reaction to the Project 2025 stuff is that it's just all bullshit. It's just like propaganda. It's like crazy extremist religious people. It's not going to happen. It's not something to worry about. It's like Democrats are just bringing it up to scare people. And I mean, there might be some of that going on. Yeah, there might be some of that going on. But like I was saying, I think it's worth taking a look at whatever side of things that you're on and like seeing what there is to it and comparing it to what Trump's trying to do, what he's said in the past and what he's done in the past. So like Project 2025's an agenda created by Heritage, which is this huge right-wing, evangelical, white Christian nationalist think tank. These Christian organizations pump a bunch of money into these things. And like the right has been like way ahead of the Democrats and the left on this stuff forever. Because, the left, like the pretty much operated for until like the last decade or so, or maybe even not that long. They've operated kind of under this like worldview that if you just tell people the truth and present them with the facts, then they'll realize what the deal is and they'll make the right decisions. And marketing and advertising, they've known that that is not true for a long time. Like they've used it to psychologically manipulate for a long time. And the right wing in their political campaigning has been taking advantage of all that like marketing data, especially like neurology and linguistics and everything. So what Heritage and these other right-wing think tanks do, part of what they do, is strategize how to control the narrative and frame things in a certain way using certain words and phrases that make people think about it like in a certain context where they're more likely to agree with the right-wing narrative. And the left, like they don't do that as much. They've been starting. I mean, this time around it seems like they're doing better with the meme culture, meme war shit. With the whole Tim Walz, like get off the couch thing, JD Vance stuff. I mean, but anyways, yeah, these Christian white nationalists, they've been pushing this, like, they call it dominionism. It's like they want to basically turn the government into a theocracy. They want their version of Christianity to become the law of the land. And that's reflected a lot in the Project 2025. But they both share like a really similar blueprint for how to consolidate power and how to like get rid of the influence of these like federal regulatory agencies, to push policies that align with like a super, almost like a dictatorship style of government, or whatever you want to call it, like theocracy, autocracy, despotism. One really strong leader calling most of the shots with like near absolute power. Anyways, let me pull up. I got like a couple things here. I don't know if this. I found this pretty good breakdown of the similarities. And then another guy on Reddit made like a great Venn diagram I'll pull up too. So comparing the two, Agenda 47, which is Trump's plan, and Project 2025, the Heritage plan, they're both talking about firing a bunch of federal employees immediately and reclassifying federal employees in certain ways to make it easier to fire them. And to like, I mean, he did that last time already. He replaced everybody that he could with his cronies. And even some of those people, when they pushed back against certain decisions he had, he canned those guys too. That's what happened with the EPA and everything. He put that coal lobbyist in charge of it. They both show plans to expand executive power, partially by doing that, partially by like reclassifying and replacing a bunch of these federal employees. The immigration policies are very similar. Long thing, on the right. Remember, Trump was saying that the first year in office, he's going to have a wall across the southern border and Mexico's going to pay for it and all that. So, I mean, that's just more of the same, really. But the 2025 does talk about that. And they want to get rid of the Department of Education. Like, this is something that Republicans have been talking about for a long time. Newt Gingrich was talking about this. He talked about rolling back child labor laws, too. I'm not saying Trump has said anything about that. But this was something Newt Gingrich was talking about back in the day. He said, let's roll back child labor laws so children can help their parents get out of debt and get out of poverty. And we'll, oh, what's up? That shit is so loud. Hey, Lalubev. But yeah, he wanted to let children work to help get their parents out of poverty, and at the same time replace a bunch of the public education funding with these vouchers so parents could choose to send their kids to private schools. So basically getting rid of public school and sending kids under 18 to go work, which you could imagine like the implications of that. It wasn't very popular, but this is basically, you know, the same agenda that they've been talking about for a long time. And I hate public school. I think it's terrible. I think it's like a brainwashing propaganda factory that only, you know, turns kids into like authority slaves. It's more about conditioning them to like be where they're supposed to be on time and listen to their whoever's in charge, and, you know, just getting ready to go into the workforce. They do learn, though. They do learn, and they get a lot of parents rely on it for childcare. A lot of kids rely on it for food. So, you know, it's a complicated thing. But yeah, they're trying to get rid of it. So both of them advocate for continuing the dismantling of public education. Yeah, there really is. And I mean, it could be so much better in so many ways. But I think the reason that it is so fucked up is because they've been doing this shit for so long. There's been this attack on public schools, but also, you know, I think it really, really like got huge in the Nixon era, when Nixon, or maybe even before that, maybe like even back to the 50s, you know, like the post-war, because like, wasn't Woodrow Wilson the only president to have a PhD, and they were like calling him an ivory tower intellectual, and that's kind of when all that stuff started. But I think you can even trace its roots back to like the Puritans, like the early Americans who were super, it's like super extreme religion. Like I mean, the Project 2025, the heritage people are basically those same people today. You know, like they're just, they didn't want people to go watch plays or like read books at all because it would, you know, turn them to the devil or whatever. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I know it blew up like in the political rhetoric, is what I was saying. Like back in that era, like the commie pinkos era and everything. But yeah, I do think that like the reason education is so convoluted and this, it's basically like it's been like run ragged and like beaten and starved, and it's barely hanging on. And that's like a common tactic that they do all the time. They're like, they want to slash funding to public programs, and then when it starts failing, they turn around and say, see, the government sucks at everything. They can't do this shit as good as we can, like with our private companies. And that's like just been that's been the playbook forever. Already talked about the deregulation stuff. They're both like deregulating industries, getting rid of environmental protections. Like Trump already did that last time. He rolled back all that stuff. He authorized like that drilling in national parks and all that. Civil rights, they want to reduce protections for LGBT and minorities, both of them. In addition to the immigration stuff, they both want to continue to the privatization of healthcare and reduce like any kind of Medicare benefits, Medicaid, federal stuff. That, you know, I think right now the way it is states have the option to use federal funds to provide people, and like, you know, all the red states don't. States do, basically. but they're trying to get rid of that. They don't want to fund any of that. You know, my daughter uses that insurance because she doesn't have like she's a student. She doesn't have full-time benefits. You know. Oh, nice. Yeah, yeah. I was like making a sweeping generalization. Thanks for letting me know. Arkansas. I wouldn't have expected Arkansas. Um, but yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Like a lot of those states are super poor. I don't know if Arkansas falls into that category. A lot of those folks are really poor. Um, Obviously, the abortion's a big thing for the evangelicals, but you know, the evangelicals are like a huge voting bloc for the Republicans. They have a lot of influence, not just over them, but they like in the South, they pretty much run the school boards and everything. So they get to say what goes in the textbooks and all that. So. Yeah, yeah, I thought so. I know some of those southern red states are really poor states. Texas not included. um, so the tariffs stuff, like that. It's funny that that's like Trump's solution to lowering inflation, to raise tariffs, which is gonna make prices on shit go up, especially on China. But he's talking about put tariffs on China. But you know, if we drill for oil, then you know the prices will go down. And they also have these sweeping changes to how law enforcement's structured, and you know how they're going to use law enforcement to basically be postured for like martial law if it's need if it's needed. You know. But anyways, that's that one. Let me pull up the other. This guy did such a good. How much time? Let me know if you can't. But he kind of outlined all the stuff that kind of. And then he shows where they overlap. So some of the stuff that 2025 has that's like pretty extreme that Trump doesn't talk about in his Agenda 47 doesn't mean that they're not like pushing in that direction necessarily, but you know, they're not going to like instantly. Okay, good. Yeah, I try to make it as big as I could. I know my face is kind of hiding it, but um, so this is one big difference. Like they want to get rid of Social Security and Medicare completely. This one says protect, but in 47 there is some stuff about cutting some Medicare and Medicaid benefits, like amounts and everything. Um, they want to completely ban abortions, like from the point of conception. That's like the normal super Christian, like right wing Christian thing to do. Even I think Catholics are into that. But you know, Trump's plan talks about 22-week abortion ban, and there's also certain you know exceptions for like cases of rape and incest and those. So it's a little bit more moderate, but it's you know it's still rolling it back. 2025 wants to totally get rid of contraceptives and like surveil people who are trying to do abortions, like put them on watch lists, use like some of the you know stuff that people were afraid of, like the Handmaid's Tale type stuff, where it's like don't use ovulation tracking apps because then they'll have your data, they'll know you know if you get pregnant, those kind of things. So not that extreme, but you know they both talk about firing all these bureaucrats and giving the president authority to get rid of pretty much anybody he wants to, which he was somewhat limited last time. Let's look at some of this stuff in the middle. So they both want to reinstate Schedule F. They both want to give the president like unknown levels of power that more than what they had before, which is part of it is that like ability to fire bureaucrats, but they're both really talking about concentrating more power in the hands of the executive branch, which when we talk about the Technofeudalism book, you kind of see like the corporations already captured. They call it corporate capture. That's like the lingo in the economics and all that. That they already took over the legislative branch. They already basically own the legislation process. They write laws. They hire teams of lawyers to write laws that are in their favor. They present them to Congress people. They give them a bunch of perks. Like that's been going on for long. They've also pretty much got the judicial branch on lock now. So all that's really left is giving the president more power and capturing the executive branch and getting rid of some of these like annoying regulators like these EPA people and Department of Agriculture and people like who have a conscience about some of this stuff and are trying to put up roadblocks to some of these companies just being able to do basically whatever they want. And that's really what this is about. Like that's really what the concentration of the executive power is about. So they both talk about testing people. Like if they're trying to get these jobs, they have to take basically like a patriotism test, a psychological exam or whatever. Make sure that they're, not going to do that. They're not going to get in the way of these companies. They want to both like totally withdraw from the rest of the world's climate accords and those kind of conversations and make the United States completely independent of all that. And we can just do whatever we want. They want to deregulate and expand drilling, like more of what he did last time. Opening up the pipelines, doing more drilling, more offshore drilling, more drilling in protected lands, giving more tax cuts to energy companies and wealthy people. They both talk about doing major deportations of illegal immigrants. And they're going after the DREAM program. Like, that's something that in the last term Trump talked about, but he wasn't even able to do it because there was such outrage about it. I remember the approval, like there were polls about it, and it was pretty much everywhere. It was like some crazy level of approval for that program. It was like 90% approval rating, something like that. Like, I'm not saying that for sure, but it was something. I mean, if it was 90, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think I'm like exaggerating that. So he like cut back on that, but now they're both talking about going after it again. So yeah, that would screw over so many people, so many families, so many kids that are like in school here and everything. Withholding federal grant money from sanctuary cities that don't comply with these policies. So if they try to harbor dreamers or like keep people from getting deported, then the federal government has authority to give them any more money for any of their civic projects or whatever they were giving them money for. They want to totally ban any kind of gender affirmation stuff, which is like, that's a controversial subject, but they want to just completely get rid of it. Like, they want to make it illegal, basically, to give people that kind of treatment, that kind of counseling, and that kind of stuff. They want to both talk about getting rid of critical race theory and gender studies, and like even in universities. They want to ban it from being talked about. And it's funny too, because like this is what I was saying earlier. Like part of the reason that Elon got so radicalized was his free speech stuff. I mean, you can bring up lots of examples, and that guy in the video does about where he wasn't, you know, there was like some lack of integrity with that, with how he runs Twitter. Because, you know, for instance, in the Twitter files, he criticized the former management of Twitter for, you know, giving people up to the government, basically, like responding to government information requests and like subpoenas for information on people, not fighting them on it legally. And then he turned around and did the same thing in a bunch of cases. And then also he's like censoring words, like you can't say cisgender on Twitter, it gets blocked. So yeah, this is a little bit of a double standard, but it's crazy that they're talking about censoring people from talking about that in universities. Anyways, yeah, wild. Deploy National Guard on Americans to restore public order. Like that's the martial law shit I was saying. They talk about some of the police stuff with that too, about like continuing to militarize police and reorganize like the police on a national level where they can be like more networked and connected with each other and cooperative, and get assistance from the federal government and communication channels and all that. Ban transgender women from women's sports. Whatever. Whatever. Like that's like pretty much a thing already. The regulatory agencies in sports already don't allow that. That's just like, you know, that's just trying to get people worked up, like that whole Olympic boxer controversy. They want to, on the same level, like they both of these plans talk about like censoring certain speech in the media also, and like making things, you know, they have to follow certain protocols and they're not allowed to talk about certain things in certain ways. They also want to get rid of student loan forgiveness, and they want to like cut funding to public transportation initiatives and those kind of things, so it makes it harder to get around if you don't have a car. So that's pretty much all the overlap that this guy identified. This Venn diagram is really cool. I should like post a link to it. Do I have a link to it? See if I can find it. Yeah, it's worth taking a look at it. It's worth taking a look at like the actual plans, you know, and like just kind of, even if you just skim over them and like seeing what kind of crazy shit is in there, especially the Project 2025. Like I was saying, it is like way more extreme than 47. But there's some weird stuff in the 47 too. You know, Trump has got his weird ideas, especially around like trade and tariffs and foreign policy, and you know, the other countries should have to pay for like our military support and that kind of stuff. But a lot of the stuff does agree with each other, you know, especially when it comes to like immigration, public education, the gender stuff and everything. They really do agree with each other a lot. But just the fact that they're so similar isn't like what I think is that concerning. Like, it's hard to ignore that there's that overlap, but I mean, the consolidation of power stuff is the biggest thing to me. Like how we were saying, it was ironic that Elon is talking about this and supporting Trump at the same time, talking about being like a rebel against the, you know, rebel against the empire. Like, literally, Star Wars was a story about one guy taking over control of the entire republic or whatever. Like, the guy Trump has repeatedly expressed admiration for dictators and authoritarian leaders like, Putin, obviously. Even Kim Jong-un, that's like how they became buddies, He's like complimenting him on his strongman like leadership of North Korea. He even complimented the president of China about and like he said something about his getting rid of term limits. I know like that made its way into the media somewhat, but I'm surprised people don't bring that up more often. Like that sticks out in my mind every time I think about this stuff. Is that like he said that I think the way the quote went was that he was a really smart guy for getting rid of term limits over there, and that maybe we'll have to try that out. And people like will pretend like it was he was just joking. But like given his personality, his like psychological profile and the things that he's done in the past and the way he's already tried to consolidate power, the way he did the whole Capitol riot thing and the like trying to hang on to power and like he preempted that. He preempted that for months by slashing funding and like doing everything he could to sabotage the post office and talk all this shit about voter fraud and mail ballots. And then when the polling results were coming in, immediately when the last polling station closed, he said he won. Before the mail ballots were even looked at, he was like, "Look, we won." And then the whole thing with the strong arm of the governor trying to say he has to find him some votes so they can win that state. Like that phone call, that transcript of that phone call, that recording, where he's basically doing his mafia boss thing and like, making these veiled threats toward this guy saying like, yo, your career's going to be over. Like nobody's going to like you anymore. Nobody's going to vote for you next time. They're going to be really mad because you didn't help me. All that shit, it all just, it points towards, that he wants that. He wants to be a man, basically. And he wants to be Emperor Palpatine. And I don't see how you can defend that. See how so many people so in love with the dude, think that he's the greatest thing since sliced bread or whatever, and I don't see how you can't see that. I mean, I guess the cognitive bias and like whatever gets in. That's the only thing I can think of. Like, so what? But what makes people think it's not going to be the same shit or going to be? Well, I can say like this election cycle, I feel better about the Democrats than I ever have before, probably. I don't know if that's enough for me to like feel okay voting for them personally, like but then again, like I'm in California, they're going to win my state. I always vote pretty much every time if I vote president. But yeah, I totally understand like people supporting them and yeah, I know you told me that before. Yeah, I mean, I always say to people like vote your conscience. It's even if your conscience is to vote Republican, like vote your conscience because I feel like that's better than the whole lesser of two evils thing. I mean, I get that argument too. Like it's almost convincing me now. You know what I mean? Because I really don't like what I see on the right and what's happening. I would like to contribute to preventing that if I could, but like I said, I think in my position it doesn't really matter at all what I do. on election day. Yeah, I'm not gonna be mad at anybody for voting Democrat or Republican. Have to do. I don't agree with it, but I don't necessarily disagree with people voting Democrat this time. I do kind of feel like I feel the same vibes, when I think about it, of like, oh man, they got us, they're getting us again with this like bullshit. Have to vote for them so this bad shit doesn't happen, and then. So I'm interested to see if they win, like what they're gonna do, and if they're gonna follow through on some of these things that they're saying they're gonna do. But yeah, like I know a miracle's not gonna happen, and some third party's not gonna win. So, yeah, I hope they do. Hope they do. Just to delay the possibly inevitable a little bit longer. But I did want to move to the technofeudalism stuff, and the guy that wrote that book, he's basically in that book he's arguing that it's pretty much already too late. That we've passed this threshold point of where we're able to do anything about any of this, because like I see parallels too. He doesn't talk about it that much. The U.S. politics and the Donald Trump stuff and everything. But I see parallels in that, like the consolidation of power in the federal government here. It's been ongoing for decades, but it's like rapidly accelerated recently with Trump, mainly. I mean, during COVID too, a lot. Yeah, the right has like some valid criticisms of, like the Democrats have proposed. They're always doing that. They don't ever disagree about giving the federal government more control over shit. they're pretty friendly in that matter. But really what this guy is talking about is that he's describing this scenario that we're in right now, and like he talks a lot about the history and the things that led up to it and the economics that are involved in everything. Yeah, for sure, for decades. But he says that like we underwent this shift, because you see memes about it sometimes where it's like, 3 media companies control the entire media, whatever. But he's looking at specifically tech companies and financial companies. So he's saying that after 2008, like with the bailout and just the money power grab that was able to happen after that, 3 companies basically took control of the entire stock market. Like they own majority stock in all of the S&P 500 companies. And I don't know if it's majority stock, but they own a lot of stock in all those companies. They have like heavy influence, if not ownership. But they basically control the stock market, and they have heavy influence on pretty much every big company. And they, including the tech companies. And then the tech companies, what they're doing is they're using their marketplaces that they built, like Apple's marketplace and the Google store after that. And I think that's the only 2. I mean, I know Microsoft has its store for like computer stuff, but they're not really huge in the mobile. But they use these marketplaces to charge everybody rent, like for nothing. I looked it up the other day too, and it's something crazy. Like if you make an app, did you know this? This blew my mind. If you make an app and you want to sell it on the Apple Store, and whether it's like a one-time fee or you have like in-app purchases or whatever, the percentage that you pay to Apple is 30%, like just for it existing on the Apple Store. Like it's the same thing as like this what they did with the streaming stuff, like Napster. You know how they outlawed it and then it came back as like Spotify and Apple Music. It's like streaming services. So, anyways, one of the things I really liked about it is he frames it as this like kind of letter to his father. So his father was like a leftist in Greece when he was growing up. He was like big into like Marx theory and those kind of things. I don't know. I thought that added a nice like emotional dimension to it. But it like it kind of talks about this like uncharted territory that we've gotten into where he calls it technofeudalism because he says it's like it's similar to old school feudalism but in a digital world. So like the everything is like modulated by these tech companies. They control everything and they gather data. They data harvest everybody all the time. And Tesla's part of this too, you know. I mean, not just with X, like Elon Musk with X and like the data collection that goes on there, but also Tesla, like they track your movement data. They have cameras in those cars everywhere. They have tons of data, everything all the time. All these devices. And he does kind of talk about the algorithms and all that stuff. That, you know, I know a lot of people have talked about that before, like the Social Dilemma documentary and everything. But he, I don't know, he just really does a good job of mapping out how we got there and how these companies did this, and you know, how these tools work, where they've become like these. They've turned into these instruments of control rather than communication tools or means of connection or like even like means of liberation, what they originally were, where the internet was like this free and open kind of Wild West type place. And so I wrote this article about it that goes way more into detail about all this on Medium. It's called like 3 Ways to Escape Digital Slavery, because the one thing that I think that he didn't really do as well as he might have in the book was when he talked about like how to get out of this situation. So, well, first let me say like the distinguishing factor that he says is the difference between, because he says like we are in post-capitalism. A lot of people say we're still in late-stage capitalism. He thinks we're in post-capitalism, this new form of like digital feudalism. And he says that like the reason why is because we're not anymore operating primarily off of this economic model that relies on profit from production. It relies more on charging people rent, which is like a distinguishing factor of feudalism itself. And I mean that's basically the main thing, main like distinguishing factor. But like I think whether or not you define it that way or whatever, it's like a semantics thing. It doesn't really matter because like the situation that he's describing, where it's, you know, your data harvested and you're basically training these algorithms, you're teaching them how to control you easier all the time. And you know, like Elon Musk even has that Neuralink thing that it's like, man, imagine like having that. I know Neuralink is like it's not straight up like, you know, you're putting a cell phone in your brain, it's on all the time. I don't know how, like, or if it collects bio data or something. I don't know how exactly it works, but I know it's like an interface thing. It's basically where you can like not use a mouse or keyboard and you can control a computer or a cell phone or something just by looking at it and like thinking at it. But even that is kind of concerning. Like, it's, you know, when do you get to the point where it's like you're just, you know, you become a robot, basically. And I think that that's like, I don't know, you read like sci-fi, weird dystopian stuff about ideas like that. Like the Borg is like that in Star Trek. That's funny because I've always like referred to capitalism as being the Borg. It just assimilates everything. But I think it's a possibility. Like people could go that way. It's like we've already given up so much free will and so much personal autonomy, which is crazy because like that is the thing that the right is always talking about fighting for, right? I think that's even why he's putting that, because they would probably say, like with Elon putting the little meme or whatever about you don't even realize you're not part of the resistance or whatever, because of some of the COVID stuff and like the stuff that the Democrats did, and you have to wear a mask and you have to get this shot and you have to line up like like cattle to get your immunizations or whatever. But at the same time, like the freedom has been reduced, not just by like some of the surveillance of the government, like the NSA and all that, but these companies have been doing the same shit. And instead of using it for like, are you trying to like blow up the Congress or something, put you on watch lists for like trying to organize political rallies or whatever, they're doing it to control your economic behavior, like to convince you to buy stuff, to make you feel like you need to buy stuff, and figure out and just constantly get better at refining that process. And I mean, where does it end really? Like where does it get to the point where you don't know like what you really want anymore, because it's just basically being dictated to you by like algorithmically. You know what I'm saying? Anyways, my biggest criticism of the book was that he kind of like lays out an idea for how to get out of the situation, which is just like the pretty typical leftist, like we need a grassroots movement kind of thing. And I'm not saying that's a bad idea. I think these organizations and the government have gotten better and better at preventing that and like dismantling that and disrupting those kind of efforts. But he's saying like we got to try to use these communication tools and these things against them. Which again, I'm not saying is a bad idea. Like they'll obviously know and see everything that's happening. But a couple of things that I was thinking about was, like there's a relationship between the people who are influencing these kind of decisions and directions and working people and us, And it's easy to paint this like adversarial picture where they're not ever going to try to help us out. But I think sometimes like in history that hasn't always been the case. Like you were saying about maybe Bill Gates or Warren Buffett or whatever. Maybe they're like flawed humans and not seeing the big picture and like they can't relate to us as well as we might like or whatever. But I think there are and there's possibility for like good, well-intentioned people who are in positions to influence those kind of things. And I think that's important to like not forget and to try to, like take the Martin Luther King Jr. approach and like win the hearts and minds of your adversaries. Because that's really kind of like how abolition happened. I know there's like so much to it, and even like in the civil rights movement in the 60s, like you you don't want to take anything away. Like, you know, Hillary Clinton had that thing where I thought that was in bad taste, how she said, like, you know, Martin Luther King organized the marches, but fucking whoever it was, FDR, was it FDR? Like, they are the ones who delivered the Civil Rights Act. Which, like, whatever. I thought, like, that wasn't the way for her to frame that, but definitely the abolition movement came from England. You know, some of these, like, rich, well-educated people started saying that it was wrong. And then some of the, like, early influential figures of early America started getting on board with it. Like, that's what happened with Ben Franklin, whose, like, eyeball is staring at us right now. He was a slave owner, and then he got rid of his slaves because he started, like, listening to some of those things that were going on in these, like, intellectual academic circles, and he was like, you know what, these people are right. Like, shit is wrong. We shouldn't be doing this. And I know there's a lot of nuance to that. Like, a lot of the abolitionists were, like, super racist also. Like, they still, like, believe that different races were, like, biologically inferior and whatever. But, like, you know what I'm saying. It's a possibility and a factor that we shouldn't just, like, brush aside and you know. I think, like, we have to take that into consideration and try to, like, see if we can find people like that. Like, even Elon Musk in the beginning, how he was. Like, it didn't necessarily have to go that way. It didn't have to go that way that he went hard to the right. Same with Joe Rogan. I think that's a problem, like, with the leftist culture and the whole, like, you know, that shit, the left eats itself conversation, the infighting and everything. But, like, they sometimes do that to people. They sometimes, like, radicalize independent, undecided people or, you know, moderate people away from them just by being fucking shitheads. And yeah, and of course, yeah, they'll, like, embrace them. Like, that's why Jordan Peterson got famous, you know, because he became, like, the golden child of the right for telling that trans kid he's not going to call him a her or whatever he did. And then, like, she complained to the school and they fired him or they put him on, like, some kind of hiatus or something. And then, you know, and then it blew up in the right-wing media here and they were like, this is such an injustice. Like, this guy was standing up for the truth and whatever. And then now, like, they all think he's a fucking genius. Like, like, they say the same shit about Elon Musk. Like, he's the smartest fucking person in the world. Which I don't think he's stupid. I really don't think he's stupid. I think he's, like, I mean, he's weird. He's pretty clearly, like, on the neurodivergent spectrum somewhere. But, you know, I think I am too. But you know, like, I don't think he's an idiot, but I don't think he's, like, the level of genius that a lot of people pump him up to be. Same with Jordan Peterson. It's just like they want to adopt him. They want to adopt these people because they're, you know, they help to, like, they help to validate the right wing ideology. Look at this smart person. They support us. We're not all dumb. Which is, like, we were talking about the voting blocks earlier, the right wing, like, the evangelicals, whatever. Like, the, like, alpha male, those like tough guys, macho guys, the fiscal conservatives, maybe not so much, but, like, a huge voting block of the right of Republicans. It's like, super poorly educated, like, just, like, bum fuck nowhere people. Like, basically, the more educated you are correlates to being more left, which makes sense why they attack education. Oh yeah, yeah, that's interesting. The other big thing that I was thinking of that he did not really talk about in there was just like the idea of like basically doing what these like tech libertarian weirdos were trying to do and like the hippies in the 60s tried to do. I don't think that's a dead end. Like, yeah, I think that when people do that and try to start these like alternative communities and stuff, they run into like a lot of the same problems that they thought were like easily avoidable that America faced when it was developing or whatever. I feel like they repeat the same kind of growing pains over and over, which makes sense. But I don't think it's a dead end. I think it's possible to create alternative communities that implement more of these kind of principles that we want to see in the world. And they have, like, they're not completely isolated. I mean, I don't even know if that's possible because you're going to need like certain things, if you want to have electronics and you want to have, medicine and stuff, like you're going to have to make some deals. But I think that if you had a community like that that got big enough and organized enough, they could really make some big differences, like, and have limited contact, like limited strategic engagement with the existing system. And if it worked, it would I think that in and of itself would shift some people. Like, you'd have to be really careful it didn't get too culty or too just wild. But I think it's a real possibility. I think it's something. I don't know. Maybe it's just one of those pipe dream fantasies that I have. But I don't know. I think it's worth thinking about and at least talking about what it might look like and how it might be done, in a way that it doesn't set itself up for failure like it usually does. It would have to implement, the sum of all the knowledge that we've gotten so far, like human nature and psychology and sociology and all that stuff. It can't just be based on this kind of what Ken Wilber in the 8-qual model calls the green meme, where it's this postmodernist kind of all values are socially constructed, everything needs to be flat, that typical kind of hippie leftist mentality. It can't be that. It would have to be up to date. Like I said, with taking into account what we know about how, for instance, the left is characterized by anti-hierarchy, but it's it's almost in that kind of setup. It's in that kind of culture or whatever. It's almost it becomes so looked down upon that it's even natural emergences of that are they're looked down upon, and it's almost people get persecuted for their differences, despite the fact that that's the opposite of what they're trying to do. I don't know. I feel like I'm not explaining it very well, but in human biology and neuroscience, theories about human brain development, social functioning, and everything. It's we're basically hardwired for tribalism, and we're hardwired for certain kind of hierarchical organization. But I think instead of just trying to force people to be a certain way that they struggle with because it's outside of their tendencies or whatever, I think you can take those things into consideration and design, redirect it, use it to your advantage. You know what I mean? Um, and a lot of it has to do with like education and culture, like in developing the right kind of culture and the right kind of like outlook. And I think like we could write books about that, but we could definitely do a whole talk about that. I do think it's an interesting concept, and I really it's something I really think about a lot when I'm sitting around daydreaming. You know, imagining how we could make the world a better place. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think? I guess I could share the article. And oh, it's like a video series. Yeah, this is cool. I'm gonna start making videos soon, and I've been trying to brainstorm like what I wanna do for my like because I'm pretty decided on I don't want to just like I might do some shorts and stuff like that, but for like long form videos, definitely gonna do animation, stock photo stuff or whatever. This is cool. Yeah, I'll definitely watch these. Put them on my watch later. A medium. Get one of these. One some new got some new equipment too. Does it sound better? Does like my mic and stuff sound better? This camera's like way. Yeah, I got a new camera too. I don't know. What do you guys think about all that? First of all, thanks for listening to me ramble on for an hour and a half about random shit. Here's a link to the. I always use Bookshop, so we don't do the whole Amazon thing. I mean, I guess we could put that video on. It was on Facebook, so something here. Google. Here, Google window going. Add it here. Oh no, it was on Facebook. It was on Facebook. Right, let me find. I think I posted in the chat earlier, actually. All right, here it is. Here it is.
Empire to become one of the richest people.
Can you hear it? Let me put this. I just put it in this little thing, but I don't think it's. Put it right here.
For a few months, I feel like I found how they handle how he treats the real heavily.
Yeah, that's bullshit, dude. Fucking hate that kind of shit.
And now
Jesus,
he's officially
dude, that is
super rich.
insane. Gotta love those government subsidies,
Overtaking
man.
every other car company.
Like, I think at this point it's still like he's pretty like idealistic, and I love it, but I don't know if that's like 100% accurate. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'd have to look it up. But I think that there are a couple patents on Tesla stuff that are proprietary, and I think the main ones are the ones that he actually invented himself. And a lot of people think that like he designed all that shit himself, which is not true. But I think he did design the power plug, which is, I don't think that's open source. The power plug itself, I could be wrong, and I don't know if it's something else, like something around the charging system also, like the chargers, the superchargers that they use, out on the streets to charge the cars, like really. So I think like they wanted to keep that proprietary because then they're gonna basically, like Apple has their own proprietary little power plugs for their phones. Like they're gonna make a bunch of money off of that shit. So I think that was like his idea in the first place to do that. Because he's thinking about making money, not just about doing what's good for the world. I think he was trying to like reconcile both of those things early on, which I don't think that's impossible either. I think he was maybe doing a pretty good job of it in the beginning, but before he kind of went hard right real.
about how to talk
Wait,
about
what did it say
Musk's
about the severance?
foray into Twitter. And there's a
It
lot
said
of hot
like no
takes
severance
for
or
free
what?
speech
Wait.
around the globe, and that free speech is a societal imperative for a
Oh,
new
3 months.
Twitter
3
culture
months.
that is, quote,
That's not bad.
extremely hardcore.
You can't hear it at all? You can't hear it at all or what? Alright, let me try this. Hold on.
He believes that there's a deep state conspiracy between San Francisco technologists infected with liberal bias and their censoring government overlords. And he is going to fix it.
Can you hear it now?
Happened?
I actually never got to the bottom of that, and I don't think anyone has. That's actually been a central question that was never answered for me during this reporting. We do know this pivot happened sometime in 2020. Why did Musk shift to obsessing over this? The answer to that probably lies somewhere in Elon Musk's brain, and it is not ethical or useful for me to try to opine on his mental health or what is going on in his brain. So let's
How about now?
Speech. He lets big accounts that were previously banned back onto the platform, including former President Donald Trump, comedian Kathy Griffin, lawmaker Marjorie Taylor Greene, Jordan Peterson. Within a few months, he posts this tweet, and he notices that it's less engagement than the Elon does not He calls an
type of voice on Twitter to amplify ideas, extreme ideas, harmful ideas, ideas that we as humanity recognize are bad ideas. And now someone with a massive megaphone has control on how big those ideas can get. And then Elon isn't totally consistent about this. Like in the case of Alex Jones, who spreads horrendous conspiracies and misinformation to a lot of people. When asked why Elon didn't let him go back onto Twitter, he said no, saying that he had no mercy for anyone who would use the death of children for gain, politics, or fame. He did eventually reinstate Alex Jones after running a poll, but you start to see that he'll reinstate anyone unless he personally takes issue with their views or what they said. What's puzzling to me is that this isn't free speech absolutism. It's not say anything you want. Musk's new Twitter then starts banning and suppressing Substack links. Substack, the place where independent journalists write. Musk made the change where you can't comment or like on anything that has a Substack article, and you can't embed tweets in your Substack article. That doesn't feel like free speech to me. Musk then decides that the word cisgender is a slur on Twitter and threatens to ban people who use it too much. Is that free speech? He then starts banning journalists who criticize him, though he did reinstate a few of them after a vote. And then starts suing media watchdog organizations, like the Center for Countering Digital Hate, trying to silence them for criticizing the new Twitter. Musk, of course, lost, with the verdict coming out saying that this lawsuit was basically about trying to silence criticism and deter others from criticizing his company. Like, this is such clear anti-free speech behavior. When Twitter users organized a protest against making users pay for a blue check mark, he banned that account. And this is what's so mind-bending. He says that he's obsessed with free speech, but then immediately after taking it over Twitter, he demonstrates an extreme hypocrisy for that very point. And
Yeah, my headphones died too, so that sucks. It was capturing the audio from my headphones, but I think you missed the part where he was saying that right after he took over Twitter, he made a "Go Eagles" tweet, and Joe Biden also tweeted like an Eagles, somebody wearing an Eagles jersey. I think it was his wife or something, whatever. But Joe Biden's tweet got more likes and engagement than Elon's, so he made his his workers artificially boost all of his tweets. Like, his tweets blow up on the algorithm more than anybody's. Like, anybody on Twitter, he gets like max visibility, which I think is like it's kind of like, before I even knew that, and just like the way he acted and like some of the things that he would say about going to Mars and that kind of stuff, like, I just felt like he really had this like weird fantasy of being like the emperor of Mars, you know? Like, I feel like he kind of looks at himself that way, you know? Like, he's like he's the king. He's the king of humanity. But anyways, this shit is crazy, right? This like 180 like free speech, but not really.
I secretly think he's doing that so that we are talking about it right now. I don't think it was ever about free speech. I also think that when he posts political propaganda ads, like this conspiracy video that says that Democrats are letting immigrants in to turn America into single-party rule, and has almost 100 million views, I think he's doing that not because he agrees with this factless piece of propaganda, but because he loves to rile people up. Though maybe he does agree with it, I don't know. Either way, he has built a platform that gives him the biggest megaphone and suppresses people that criticize him. That is not free speech. Okay, but let's move on, because free speech was just one of his three major motives. What about this argument that Twitter is infected with liberal ideology because it is based in San Francisco? Luckily, we have data. This was a great study, very thorough. Algorithmic amplification of politics on Twitter. It's a study from before Elon took over. They conducted a long-running, massive-scale randomized experiment where they looked at a huge number of tweets from 7 countries. And they found that in 6 out of the 7 countries, including the United States, that, quote, the mainstream political right enjoys a higher algorithmic amplification than the mainstream political left. They saw this over and over. Oh, and also a really interesting side note here is that they found that Twitter actually doesn't amplify far left or far right political groups more than moderate ones, which is a myth that I believed until I read this study. But the whole point is that old Twitter did not have a liberal bias. If anything, it had a conservative bias. This study is very robust proof of that. Okay, but what about the last critique? And this is a big one. Musk believed that Twitter was being censored by governments, and Twitter was letting them do this. And guess what? That is actually true. Upon taking over Twitter, Musk cracked into all of the internal communications and found a bunch of emails that showed how Twitter had banned and suppressed information that it deemed harmful and dangerous, but that they did so sometimes with a political bias. You can see things like Biden's team asking Twitter to review these tweets that they didn't like. Yes, governments around the world can ask Twitter to take things down in their country that they think are breaking the law or that are harmful to national security. And this happened on both sides. The Trump White House asked Twitter to take things down as well. But this reporting did reveal what looked like a lot of left-leaning bias in censoring certain highly sensitive content that would be damaging to the left. The big example of this was this New York Post article about Hunter Biden's laptop. Twitter severely censored this, not even letting people DM the link to each other, and making up a thin justification for it later. Now, content moderation, deciding what is harmful and what should be censored and what shouldn't, is a really difficult task. But for a lot of people, including myself, this crossed a line. This was not okay. Though I have to say that Hunter Biden New York Post article was the most sort of egregious one. A lot of the other stuff in the Twitter files was not nearly as black and white. Much more nuanced, much more complicated. The point is, there should be transparency here, and I agree with Musk on that. Okay, but this is once again where we find some strange paradox that doesn't make any sense, which is that since Musk took over, government censorship on Twitter has gone up.
Twitter suspended multiple journalists from prominent outlets, including the Washington Post, the New York Times, and CNN.
Here are the number of takedown requests that governments around the world made to Twitter in the 6 months before Musk took over. And these are the ones that Twitter complied with. Twitter would fully comply with the government's censorship request about half of the time. The other half of the time, they'd say no. In the 6 months after Musk, the number of requests went up, probably because Musk got rid of a lot of the automatic moderation. But look, Musk's Twitter now says yes to government censorship over 80% of the time. Way more than the old Twitter. Wait, what? And look, the kind of stuff that Musk is allowing to be censored on the platform is really sensitive stuff for free speech. Like, take Turkey, for example. There was a Turkish election last year. The president of Turkey, himself a massive user of state censorship, pressured Twitter to block the accounts of a few people he didn't like. A Kurdish businessman, an investigative journalist, both of them vocal critics of the president. Like, this is like clear black and white political censorship in an election year. Like, make the guy who is criticizing me go away. And guess what? Musk's Twitter did it. They said yes. They banned the accounts and then said, we didn't have a choice. They were going to shut down all of Twitter, so we had to do it. And then they patted themselves on the back about how they were still trying to fight it. And they're doing so much for battling government censorship and transparency on the platform. But guess what? They did have a choice. This same kind of thing happened before Musk ever came in, and Twitter fought back. In a previous Turkish election, the government tried to do the same thing, censor posts about corruption within the Turkish government. They asked Twitter to take these down, and Twitter said no. They fired back that political speech is among the most important speech, especially when it concerns matters of possible corruption. So, Turkey shut down Twitter. It was down for a couple of weeks while they battled it out in court, and the Turkish government lost. Indeed, they lost because they were trying to censor political speech, and Twitter fought back. There's even more recent examples, like Wikipedia, or Wokepedia, as Elon calls it, refusing to comply with the Turkish government's censorship requests, getting completely shut down for almost 3 years, only to have it be overturned in Turkish courts. A major win for free speech in Turkey, which is something that's in short supply lately. So like Wikipedia, Twitter can do this. They can say no to the Turkish government. If they're actually crusaders for free speech, and if they're actually against government censorship, they would have said no in 2023. Musk's Twitter did this in India too, when the Indian government asked Twitter to censor a bunch of journalists, including an entire BBC bureau and a documentary that was critical of the government and the president, and Twitter complied. Elon, where is your conviction for free speech? Where is your hate for government censorship in moments like this where it really, really matters? But for Elon Musk, he's got a lot of other things he needs to think about. He needs to think about the market for Teslas, who might be buying his satellites or rockets. He needs to be thinking about where Tesla factories might be set up, the market for his electric cars. This is a conflict of interest that gets in the way of his idealistic vision for free speech and his hate for government censorship. Twitter used to have a page where they would publish in detail why they would take down any content they took down at the request of the government. And there's this research lab at Harvard that would aggregate all of this for the public. When our story producer Alex went to go look for these government requests from Turkey and India, she found that they no longer were there. This page had gone quiet. So she reached out to the Harvard lab and got this response. Twitter stopped sharing this data starting in April 2023. No more transparency on government censorship. It looks like it's down to the whims of one super rich dude. That is not free speech. That is the antithesis of what this guy said he was going to build. So no, I don't think Elon Musk is earnest about these 3 things that he said were his motive for buying Twitter. In fact, after looking into all of this, I'm having a hard time figuring out what Elon is earnest about at all, other than his belief that humans have the potential to do amazing things. I do believe that in all of this, that is the one thing that has stayed consistent. But how he's pursuing that goal and that vision in recent years is baffling, confusing, and, in my mind, quite harmful to our society. Twitter seems much more like a platform where he can bully the people he doesn't like. He can feed his addiction to crisis and controversy while also showing a childish hypocrisy in his principles and values. But unlike his other ventures, which you can tell when they're successful because they're physics. The rocket either goes up into space or it doesn't. This new venture doesn't have a physical feedback loop that tells him if it's doing good or working. Instead, he's playing with the delicate, precarious nature of information in the internet age, something that is already in crisis. And what blows my mind most is that in the process of all of this, Musk is undermining his own dream, his own vision. This is a sentiment I heard from the employees and colleagues of Elon Musk. They felt betrayed, like this man pushed them to think differently, to do things that seemed impossible, all in the name of this grand vision of what humanity could be, what we could do as a civilization. And yet in recent years, he seems to be sabotaging that very vision, alienating the people and customers that he needs to bring this vision to life. In my mind, Elon has exchanged that vision for controversy and division that forces all of us to talk about it. Here we are, talking about it, talking about him. I think a part of him loves that, or needs that. And yet, after all of this, defenders of Elon will continue to argue that only someone like this could be the one to change the world. And yeah, I get that. The people who change the world aren't normal and orthodox. They're not nice. But I don't accept this way of thinking about Musk today, maybe a couple years ago. But in recent years, Musk has shown it's his addiction to crisis and attention that is having a corrosive effect on our society. Validating and glorifying ways of acting that rewards the worst parts of us. And instead of saving civilization, driving us further apart.
They're saying I'm dating too much.
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. Like, that guy basically came to the same kind of conclusion that I came to. I mean, just without doing all that research. I mean, if you just pay attention to what's going on in the world as it happens, you know. But yeah, I think he said it pretty well. I think he like his closing remarks there were pretty well stated. But yeah, it's crazy how, like, you know, a lot of the people that were fans of him and believed in him and what he was doing, they're still just like doing the hero worship thing. You know, they can't even see it. But I don't know. That's why I think this kind of stuff's important. Like, to try to keep stepping back all the time and looking at the big picture and how everything ties into each other and whatever. Not like fall for the hero worship thing. Because, like, it's never good. There's, like, only... I think I might have told you that story before, but there's only one example in history of leader that I can think of that, like, actually was like an ideal leader, you know? I mean, there were other really good ones, and, like, they did good stuff and whatever. Like, people are corruptible. They're, like, very easily corruptible. And sometimes it's not because of, like, bad intentions. I'm not saying that's, like, the case with Musk. Like he was saying, I think there's some naivety involved in some of the stuff, like lack of self-awareness and whatever. But you know, later he said, like, no, some of this stuff, like, crosses the line, you know, into, like, maliciousness and defensiveness and whatever, and ego shit, you know. But that's what I'm saying. I think, like, was that who said that? Like, was it Abraham Lincoln? Who said, like, if you want to test somebody's character, like, give them power. But there was a guy in the Roman Republic, like, before they became the empire. His name was Cincinnatus, Lucius Cincinnatus, and he, you know, like I said, it was before the empire. It was still when they were a republic, so they had, like, their representatives that they elected. It was like a democratic process. They would elect these, like, Senate members. But they had, you know, they had, like, all their slaves, you know, like Spartacus type stuff. They had all these slaves, like, these conquered people. And there were these citizens that were, like, non-voting citizens. They call them plebeians. And they had a revolution, like, they had an uprising, and they Cincinnatus was, like, a former politician. He was retired. He lived, like, on a farm, and they were like, we need this guy. We need him to, like, solve this for us. Like, he'll know what to do. So they voted, the Senate voted to basically give him, like, Emperor Palpatine emergency powers to, like, crush the rebellion. And he did it. And when he was done, he said, all right, I'm going back to the farm. Like, take here. And he handed the reins of the government back over to the Senate. So he, like, stepped down and relinquished power. And I don't know, they might have done this more than once. It might have happened twice. But something that's really interesting about that, too, that I love, is that, for one thing, George Washington, the whole reason that we have term limits in the United States is because George Washington was inspired by and influenced by that guy in history, and he decided that he was going to, like, they would have kept voting for him. They loved George Washington. So, but he said, like, no, it's somebody else's turn. Like, I'm relinquishing power. I don't want to become, like, another king type figure. So he set like the standard for, he set the precedent for the presidential term limits, and eventually it was like written into law. At the time, it wasn't a law. Anyways, the city of Cincinnati is also named after that guy. He like there was a secret society that was kind of used him as like a almost like this deified figure. So they like wanted to aspire to be like him, kind of. And it was called the Society of Cincinnatus. They are the ones who started the city of Cincinnati, Ohio, and that's why it has that name. So just some interesting like American history, leadership, freedom shit that I think is cool. But yeah, Elon Musk is definitely not like that. He's and I mean it also kind of ties back into the stuff I was saying in the very beginning, and a lot of the things I've been thinking about and working on lately about like human consciousness development and like the age that we're in, where it's like the age that we're coming out of, that we've been in since, I mean, it really like came to its climax, I think, like in the 1500s. But or at least like it like reached a turning point then. But it's like characterized by this like ego consciousness. And the reason I say then is because like that's when Descartes like transformed philosophy into modern philosophy. He did his famous like cogito ergo sum thing, the I think therefore I am. And the way that he did that was, it seems like pretty innocent. It seems very like Socratic, like, Plato, skepticism type. Like I'm going to start with skepticism and Plato's cave and all that kind of talks about that, where it's like you don't know if your senses are deceiving you or this is like a dream or whatever. But he started with that. He was like, I'm going to doubt everything that I can possibly doubt. Like, I don't believe anything like that I want to believe. I'm just going to, start with what can I know? What can I know for sure? Beyond the shadow of a doubt. And the only thing that he said that you could know for sure was that you exist. Because if you didn't exist, like you wouldn't be able to think about whether or not you exist. So at least his mind exists, So he starts from that starting point. But if you really think about it, that starting point is completely egocentric. So like there was this huge shift in human consciousness through, I don't know if you were here at the very beginning, I was talking about like the Julian Jaynes thing and how he was talking about humans before a certain time period, like their internal monologue wasn't, they didn't look at it as like their self. They looked at it as like, like they're like the gods or their ancestors or spirits or whatever, like talking to them and guiding them. So they had this, he called it the bicameral mind. It was like there was the listening mind and then there was the speaking. And the speaker was not the self. It was like something else outside in the world. And so this shift in consciousness towards this like ego individualism is like the kind of zeitgeist of the modern era, or whatever you want to call it. Gene Gebser calls it the mental structure consciousness. But what I'm excited about is that I feel like something that's happening now in like it's like bubbling under the surface, Like, I mean, it's more than it was. Because I think it started, probably in like the 40s, 30s, 40s, something. Like after the Industrial Revolution. Anyways, I feel like there's this big shift happening. Like people are trying, like they're starting to look past that paradigm of like this like sterile, very like defined and logical, contrapoints. Yeah, exactly. That's what you were saying last time we talked. And Gene Gebser calls it the integral structure. It's kind of like a reunification of the prior, because I don't know. I could talk about that shit all day. I don't want to get insane with it, but yeah, I think that's exciting, and I think it also like holds some kind of potential solutions to a lot of problems that we haven't been able to think about yet. Like in a way to kind of conceptualize it is I was listening to this philosopher talk on YouTube the other day about how he's skeptical of the whole idea that there was some kind of advanced civilization in like human prehistory, because that was like wiped out by a cataclysm. And he wasn't necessarily saying that there wasn't or there couldn't have been, but he was saying that it wasn't. If there was, it couldn't have been like what we think of technology, where like you have like car engines and like replaceable parts and those kind of things, because that, in order to invent that, the reason the Romans didn't have that, the reason like nobody had that. Oh, okay. Yeah, take care. I'll see you next time. Like, I gotta. Oh yeah. Yeah, have a good night, Tree. But yeah, like that whole shift in consciousness, like to the mental structure, had to happen before that, like to be able to conceptualize, like energy transfer through, like to make an engine work. Before that, it wasn't like even, they had to go through steps to be able to think about things in that way. And that wasn't evidence. Like, really, we don't have any evidence. Yeah, it could have got wiped out in a cataclysm, whatever they say. But what I'm saying is that to get to this level of technology, like that shift towards the mental structure had to happen, and the individualism stuff and all that. And this new one that's happening, like it opens up all these possibilities for thinking of solutions to current problems in certain ways that we've previously been unable to think about. Like Mark Fisher and some of the like leftist political theorists have said that it's like pretty much impossible for us to even imagine like a post-capitalist world, because we don't understand how to do that, because it's you can't imagine the escape from it. Even the materialist paradigm, a lot of the socialist stuff is still like revolves around materialist economy and those ideas, like what I was saying about Karl Marx. So I don't know, it's exciting to imagine that there might be like some kind of doors opening into new modes of thought that will allow us to transcend like this level of existence that we've been on that feels just like kind of empty and hollow and like isolated. But anyways, I'm gonna jump off too. I'm gonna wrap up. I hope everybody had a good time. See you next time. Next week, same time, PM Pacific. Yeah, like I said, we're gonna get the Discord server up this week. Starting doing some short clips.